So
This
it's a
conference will now be recorded.
So it's a disease that's caused by virus. So the virus is called SARS-CoV-2. And why the name SARS means severe acute respiratory syndrome. It's just a name of the disease because this virus causes a disease in your lungs. So this is what happened. That's where the name SARS came from. And CoV is just an abbreviation for coronavirus. And two, I will tell you why two, because there had already been one. So that's why it's two. So that's why the name was given SARS-CoV-2. So it's a member of this family, what we call coronavirus. I don't want to go too much into detail of all the virology and everything. My purpose of showing this slide is that this virus is a new. Okay, this kind of coronaviruses are found in almost all different animals. So if you look at this slide, if you look at this one, you see avian coronavirus, equine coronavirus, bovine coronavirus, meaning that these coronavirus are found in horses, in birds, in humans, everywhere, even in the mouse. This is mouse coronavirus. So these coronaviruses are not new. So this virus does not just come out of new. We already know about it. There's so many different coronaviruses out there. And if you look at this slide, again, it's a very complicated. But what is showing is that there are different kind of coronavirus. We divide them into different groups based on how similar or how different they are. One thing I want to point, so this is the family, this B, which has human coronavirus, like you see SARS, right? But close to it, you see name like bat. See bad coronavirus, bad coronavirus, bad corona. What that means is that the bad coronaviruses are very, very similar to humans. So there's a very, very good chance that the spillover happened from the bats, not probably from equines or from the canine or other things. And why they are called coronavirus is also just because of the shape, how they look. Corona came from a name crown. In old times, kings used to wear crown and then looks like spikes. So if you look at this virus under the microscope, it looks like somebody is wearing a crown with spikes on it. And these spikes are actually very, very important, and these are the targets for the therapeutic as well. So that's why the name was given coronavirus, because of the structure, nothing else, the shape, how it looks. So where did it come from? There are so many theories going on, and I look at the news every day, like, oh, it came from a lab in Wuhan, somebody genetically engineered it, or it was a bioterrorism, or what happened, or this happened. Like I mentioned in my previous slide, this is not new. What happened in 2002, there was another outbreak. That was the first known outbreak of coronavirus. That was the first outbreak, SARS coronavirus. That was actually very dangerous and very fatal. And that virus actually came from bats. So from bats, it came then to some of the animals, like wild animals, and then these wet markets where these wild animals are sold for food or other things. And eventually it got into humans. And when it's in human, then a community transmission starts happening between humans and humans. Luckily, that outbreak stopped within few months, and after that, we never heard till now. So now, after 17 or 18 years, we see another virus very similar to that virus. Actually, the virus that we currently see is only 20% similar to this virus, which actually came in 2002. So since then, people are working on this. So that there has been 18 years. A
Hello.
lot of research has been done on coronaviruses. So we are not starting from scratch. We know a lot about these viruses. That's why within few months of this outbreak, there are so many treatment options because we know a lot about this virus. Okay, and that was not the only example of coronavirus. There are another coronavirus that came in 2010, and which is called MERS coronavirus. Why MERS? Because this virus came in Middle Eastern countries like Dubai and Kuwait. So that's why the name was given, like Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. But this is also a similar coronavirus like the SARS coronavirus. And this happened to transmitted from camels. So we don't know how it probably came to camels, maybe long time ago. But a lot of these camels carry these virus. And in Middle Eastern countries, people like to keep camels and they love their camels and they also kiss their camels. So this is a good thing, but it could spread you infection. So that's what happened in case of MERS, that a lot of these people who had these camels got infected from this coronavirus. And one thing, this MERS coronavirus hasn't gone away. It's still there, 10 years. 2010 was the first case of MERS coronavirus. It's still there, meaning that it's not a guarantee that this coronavirus will go away. It could just stay in our population for forever. So, at the example of this MERS coronavirus, that it is still there with us. So it could happen that the SARS coronavirus 2 that we are currently see, it may just stay with us for forever. It may just never go away. So that's what looks like the origin of the SARS coronavirus 2, because bats are known to be a very good transmission host. The way bats live together and they transmit and they also transmit many other viruses like Ebola, rabies, Hendra, Nipah virus. All of them are very dangerous viruses. So it looks like the current theory that the virus, the SARS-CoV-2, is very similar to bat coronavirus. So it looks like either it directly came from bat or from a bat to another animal and from that animal to human. It's a very nice likelihood that it could have come from a lab. So that's why these are the two scenarios that possibly explain either there's a natural selection in an animal host, or it came from a bat to human, and then from human to human the transfer start happening, and that happens. It's nothing new. These kind of viruses, these are RNA viruses, they do that, and this is not the first time we are seeing this kind of zoonotic transmission. So let's just see what happened with this SARS-CoV-2, right? What we know. So this slide is a very complicated slide, but I will try to break it down. So this slide is showing the journey of SARS-CoV-2, what we know. So like if you remember, the case starts coming at the end of last year, sometime in December. December 31st was the first time when Wuhan reported that there are several people who coming up with this mysterious pneumonia-like illness. At that time, they did not know that it was a coronavirus, but within a day or two, they figured it out because we know about coronavirus. When the first coronavirus outbreak happened, it took us 4 to 5 months just to find out what virus was it. Here, it probably took a couple of days to find out. And then probably they located there the center of the outbreak, maybe the seafood market where the live animals are sold, so they closed that market. And within a week or so, they confirmed that this virus was actually a coronavirus. After January 8th, by January 8th, it was confirmed that it was coronavirus. After that, there was a reports that initially people thought that it just came from animals to humans, so there is not going to be any human to human transmission, and that happens too with flu and other viruses, where it can just come from animal to human, but no human to human. So initially for a month, everybody thought that it will not transmit from human to human. But around January 20, that's when we started realizing that there's a community transmission happening. The virus is being transmitted from human to human. And after that, as you can see, once the community transmission starts, within a month, the cases just skyrocketed. From nothing, it became like, now we know millions of cases. And as you can see from here, from Wuhan here, within a month, virus basically spread almost everywhere. So it took a month for the virus to jump from Wuhan to every corner of the world. And many of these countries probably had these virus cases before they started reporting, because they thought that virus will not come to them, but it just went everywhere. So what it looks like today, this is the data from a week ago, like up to May 6th. So this slide, again, it's a very complicated slide. I will try to break it down. So this one is taking the current number of cases with a geographic distribution. As you can see, if you start from December 30, 2019, there are almost no cases. And now you can look at the May 4 and you can see number of cases just keep going up. There's no slowdown. And number of cases have gone dramatically very high. But one thing that's very important to point out here, so this graph is telling number of cases in each continent. For example, yellow is for America, right? And this orange, red is for Europe. And then we have the other colors for Asia and Africa. But if you look at this map, it's only yellow and red, right? There's nothing else. So basically, majority of the cases are only in America and Europe. And that's very interesting and surprising. The countries like continents like Africa, continent like Asia, countries like India, they have very few cases. Look, this is a kind of Asia. This is very few cases compared to all those. And that brings a lot of questions. Why is that? Why a country like India has very few cases? Why countries America and Europe?
I would like to interrupt in between. The slides are not changing.
Not changing? It's not changing. So it's, oh, I'm sorry.
area of Vinus.
So slides are not changing. So how do I do this? I will stop sharing and start sharing again. Okay.
Yeah.
Share again. Hopefully, then it will show up. It is showing up now. Will it
Yes,
change?
sir. It's okay now.
It's okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
sir.
Up to what slide you show? I don't know. I was just talking. I don't know when it stopped changing. So
It was
did you
only
see
first
this
slide we have seen.
Just first slide. Oh my God. So
Yes.
sorry. I already talked to everything. Okay, you saw this slide, right? You see this slide, no?
Yes, sir.
You saw this slide, right? And it's okay. Okay, just you can see this one, right? So I will just start from this one. So, as you can see, there are a lot more cases in America and Europe than in any other country, and there are several reasons for it. One reason could be that there's a lot more older population in these countries. You know, if you So India had much younger population. Europe and America had much older population. That could be one of the reasons. Second reason could be that there's a lot more testing in these countries compared to India and Africa. That could be one reason. Or if people in India, we could have more immunity because, from previous exposure, that could have helped us as well. But we don't know. The cases could still rise, but this is what it looks like right now. Can you see this slide, right? I just want to make sure. So this is what it looks like in America. So this is a map of all the different 50 states of America, and what is showing you is that based on the color, you could see which state had more cases compared to other states. So if you look at the lighter color, that means they have very, very few cases, and all with the dark color had high cases. As you can see, there are only few states in America that actually had very high cases. All other states actually had very low to mild cases. And those states are like states like California or New York, which are actually highly, highly populated states. They have a huge population. So that could be the reason too, because the disease seems to spread first in the urban areas, and then slowly the disease go to the rural area. So most of this middle America is all rural America, and all of the coastal America is the urban America. So you can see all the dark colors are on the coast, and then all the lighter color are in the middle. So that's what happened with India too. You will start seeing the cases in Delhi and Bombay and in the Kolkata, the major urban cities, and then slowly the virus will go into the rural area. So this is another busy slide, but just to mention one thing, because another.
Thank you, Mr. Mukesh. Please again ensure that the slides are moving.
Slides are not moving?
Yeah, no, it's been stuck up at the same time. Please ensure by sharing properly.
Why stopping? Yeah, I will just stop it again. And no, it's my video. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to, I can't figure it out now, how to share. It's already sharing, right?
You can press F5. Yeah. Now it's like it has moved. Yeah.
I don't know why it's because of me, my internet or something. I'm sorry.
Once again, and then press F5.
F5.
F. Slideshow.
F5. Okay. Is it moving now? It did not move, right?
It's a changed slide now. Can't say about the next slide.
Yeah, it's not moving. See. So it's moving on my computer, but it's not moving here. So I don't know how to do that. I'm also learning the technology. So sorry about that. I just no cancel.
Mr. Mukesh, you have not pressed F5 slideshow.
I am pressing F5.
Either it's the slideshow has not started. It's just the sides.
Sir, you directly click on the slide what you want to show. If you want to show slide number 11, then just click that slide number 11, nothing else. Don't press next button.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Can
that
you
will
see
be
this
better.
slide now?
Yes.
Risk factors for COVID-19.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
Okay. Sorry, I will try to make sure that you guys can see all the
It's
slides.
okay. It's okay. I think you've been given the right direction. You can press the slide number and it will be visible. It's okay.
Okay. Okay.
Please,
I'll
it
do
is a
that.
nice talk. Please carry forward.
Sorry. So, one thing we always say, what are the risk factors? We say how many people actually die from this disease. And it's little difficult because we don't know how many total cases are. We haven't tested everyone. So there could be mortality rate could be much lower. But the interesting thing is that it varies. It varies from population to population. So if you look at overall mortality rate, it looks like 3 to 4%. So out of 100 people who get infected, maybe 3 to 4 people will die. So that looks like a very low mortality rate. People think, oh well, that's a very low mortality rate, so it's nothing to worry about. But that's not true for everyone. If you look at some population like elderly, if you are more than 60 or 70, your mortality rate can go as high as 20%. That's very high. That's 1 out of 5 people, right? And if you have disease like any cardiovascular disease like heart or any other problem, that your mortality rate goes high again, 13%. Large number of people have cardiovascular disease. For example, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, your chances of dying goes up to 10%. Same way, if you have asthma or any COPD, then rates are high. Even if you have hypertension, rates are very, very high. As we know, large number of people have blood pressure problem, large number of people have diabetes problem. So in general, the mortality rate that looks like 3 to 5% could be very, very high in a certain population. So it's very important to know that people who falls in these. Yes. So I don't know what happened again, but I hope you could hear me. So this graph is also showing the same thing. So this is based on the age. As you say, as the age goes high and high, your mortality rate become higher and higher. So if you're 80 plus, then you're very high, and the same way. If you are younger, then you don't have, but that doesn't mean that you can't die. There are still chances that even if you are young, you can still die from it. Same way, if you have any of these underlying conditions, you will have much more higher chances of death. Another interesting thing is this one, which is basically sex. So seems like a lot more males die than the female. And let me show you why that is. And you can't see this slide now, right? Because you can't move. So it will move now. Okay, good. Now I figured out how to do that. Okay, so as you look at these slides, look at male and female comparison. So out of all the deaths that have happened so far, 60% of males have died compared to 40% of female. Now, there could be different theories for that. One theory was that, oh well, males could be out of the house and working more, so that's why this might have happened. But that may not be true, because if the males get infected, they come home and they will infect their family too. And why would we see a much more higher mortality rate in males than in the females? And one of the reasons could be that because of the hormonal, one of the receptor that's required for virus to infect is ACE2 receptor, and that receptor changes with the age and the hormonal level. So there's a good possibility that males may be having a higher expression of that receptor. That's why it's leading to more people. So that could lead to more people getting infected. Now I will go to next. So we talked about how the disease came, what was the origin of the disease, and what's the current epidemiology look like. So let's talk about next about the transmission, how the disease is transmitted. As you know, it can be transmitted. It's usually transmitted from person to person, usually through a close contact. And I want to make sure you understand this thing, that it's not that easy for one person to spread it to too many people, and I will show that you in the next slide. But usually the transmission happens this way. So a person who is infected could sneeze, could cough, and all the droplets could be in the air. And person who is close by, like we say about closer than 6 feet or something, that's what we say, then other person can inhale those and possibly get infected. Another way of getting infected is that you could have all this sneezing and everything going on in objects like computer or table or something in your house, and or in the grocery store, and somebody else will come and touch it, and then they touch their nose or mouth, and then the virus goes inside. That's why we say all those things like keep a 6 feet distance, or don't touch your eyes or nose frequently, because even if you have something on your hand, it will not go in until you touch your nose or other things. So that's what usually it seems to spread. But one concern that's there, that it can be transmitted even if you are asymptomatic, meaning that symptomatic people are sneezing, they are coughing, so we're thinking that they're producing a lot of droplets. But even the asymptomatic people could also have some amount of virus in their nose, in their mouth. When they touch their nose or their mouth, even if they don't sneeze, the virus could be on their hands, and when they touch something else, it could go there, and then again they can transmit. May not be as much like symptomatic people, but still they can transmit the disease. Okay. So this slide is showing, just to give you an idea. Can you see this slide? Hello?
Yes, we can see.
You see this new
Yes, we
slide
can.
with, yes. Okay, good.
Yes,
So-
sir, we can solve.
Good. So this slide kind of show like how many person an infected person can transmit the disease to, and that's based on this R0, what we call a replication event or something. So if you look at this kind of a graph, you will see that this COVID-19 is no different from any other virus. For example, for COVID-19, one infected person may infect up to 2 to 3 people. If you look at the flu, that's a common cold, one infected person usually spread anywhere between 1 to 1.5. So it is, of course, higher than the flu. And if you look at other viruses like Ebola, it's almost same. If you look at the SARS-CoV-1, which happened in 2002, which was actually more transmissible than COVID-19. And another coronavirus, which is what the MERS, could actually transmit to much more people. So based on this, it doesn't look like that one person will go and infect to hundreds of people. Usually one person ends up infecting another 2 to 3 people, and most of these people are usually household people. So it's not that one cluster, one person will just infect the entire. So that's
This
flattening the curve.
conference will now be recorded.
So this kind of graphs like flattening the curve becomes really important. What that means is that, like I mentioned, this virus may not go anywhere and it can keep on spreading. So what that means is that if you don't take these protective measures, which include social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands, then your number of cases at one certain time points can be very, very high. What that means is that you don't have that kind of healthcare system capacity to take care of all these cases. But if you take all these protective measures, then you will still have infections, but they may be in a lower, and maybe you flatten the curve, meaning that those cases comes over the period of time. So your overall cases remains below the healthcare system capacity. In that way, it's better to manage. That's why all these guidelines of social distancing and everything becomes so important. Okay. Okay, so we talked about transmission. Now, next thing, let's move on to the symptoms of COVID-19. It's a very complicated disease, right? So initially, when we thought SARS-CoV-2, everybody thought it's a respiratory disease. So the symptoms will only be like pneumonia and sneezing and sore throat and respiratory distress. And we'll talk about this thing, ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. That's the reason people are actually dying. And we'll talk that about in detail. But other than the respiratory symptom disorders, there are many other symptoms people are showing, and that's very surprising. And I will show you in the next slide why that is. So people are showing like coming up with diarrhea, people are coming up with a heart problem, people are coming with a systemic infection like fever, cough, headache, a multiple syndrome. So it doesn't look like this is a disease just of respiratory system. It looks like it's a systemic disease, and the virus can basically infect every organ, which means you could see different disease in different patients, and that could have be due to those underlying conditions. Remember, I talked about there are people with the cardiovascular disease, people with diabetes, people with respiratory syndromes are at more susceptible. And depending upon what kind of underlying condition you have, the disease may look very different. People with heart condition may even get worse heart condition, right? With diabetic, maybe worse diabetes because of the once you have COVID-19. I hope this makes sense. Okay. So why this disease is so deadly and so difficult to treat? Like I mentioned in the previous slide, symptoms are everywhere. And the reason
कई
and
चल
the,
लिए ने अपने तो पंचकुला दिखा दिए बासी के पास दिवाड़ी तो पंचकुला
so the reason being is that this COVID-19 damaging effects on all over your body. So basically it has effect on lungs, and that's where you get pneumonia. And in the end, actually there's so much inflammation. I will talk about that too, that it can cause a very serious lung damage, which can be fatal. But that's not the only thing you see. Another important thing you see, this thing, blood vessels, clotting. What people are seeing is that there are clots are being formed in people, in veins, which is very dangerous situation. What happened with these clots is that they can stop the supply of the blood to any organ, like to the brain or to the heart or to the lungs, which can mean that organ failure. And that's a very serious concern. That's why people are seeing stroke, people are seeing kidney problems. A lot of people are seeing actually severe kidney problem with the disease. And also a lot of people are seeing diarrhea. It means that intestines are also getting infected. Intestines are actually very hard to infect, but in this case they are also getting infected along with heart as well as brain. Large number of people are reporting strokes. They are reporting that they lost the sense of smell, sense of taste. People have headache, meaning that the virus could go anywhere. That's what it becomes very, very hard to treat. It's not only a respiratory disease anymore.
Sir, how much time it would take to develop antibody for viruses and in our
That's a
body?
good question. You know, it's a respiratory disease. It takes at least 10 to 15 days to minimum to have a good amount of antibody, but could be longer.
Sir, as you said that this virus is from 18 years ago, means from 2002. It's running on from 2002.
No, it's not
So,
same virus. I mean, it was a different, I mean, little different from that one. So that was SARS-CoV-1, and this is SARS-CoV-2. So that virus came in
okay.
2002 and spread for a few months, and then we did not see any other case. But then
Sir, but this virus is taking too long to develop antibodies in our body.
yes, it is. It is. It
So,
is taking
sir,
too long.
फिर तो we can't cure it from plasma therapy also.
I am never in the favor of plasma therapy. Plasma therapy is a cheap fix. In the olden times, we used to do this. See, plasma therapy works based on the principle that antibodies in your plasma will cure it, right? But for a
Yes,
viral
sir.
infection, especially a viral infection which infect you deep in your lungs or deep in your brain, antibodies can't reach. There's no way antibodies going in the deep alveoli of your lungs and getting rid of virus. It's never going to happen. Antibodies can only work if they are given very early. For example, some person just got infected, right, and have a very low
Yes,
infection.
sir.
The infection hasn't gone deep in the lungs. Then at that time, a small amount, a good amount of antibody could save that person, right? But if a
Yes,
person is
sir.
put in ICU and things are already bad, then antibody.
I request the delegate to please wait for the question answer session as not to interrupt the speaker in between. Please, it's a request.
Okay. So continuing with the symptoms, and I want to mention about this thing, ARDS and death. So this is very important. This is the reason people are dying. Basically, your lungs are drowning. And the reason the lungs are drowning is not necessarily because of the virus. It's because of the inflammation. Inflammation is just your protective immune response. Your body reacts to kill the virus. But sometimes what happens is that the body reacts too much. and the virus can get killed, but because of that inflammation, actually your organs get hurt and it can be fatal. So what that we usually call it is called autoimmune disease. So this coronavirus has eventually becomes an autoimmune disease, meaning that you are not necessarily dying because of the virus, you are actually dying because of your own immune response. And that's what's happening here. If you, I don't know if you can see, but basically there's a huge inflammation in your lungs, a lot of immune cell reaching there, and eventually they fill up all of your alveoli, and then eventually you can't breathe and you have pneumonia and then you die. And this is not necessarily because of the virus. So we call it immunopathogenesis. So the pathogenesis happens because of your own immune response, and that's what's happening in many patients. And that could not only be lungs, but in other tissues as well. Okay. So I just talk a little bit about, I don't know if you can see this slide. Did my slide move? No, right? Now it moved. Okay. Okay. So as you know, the disease has been going on. There's a huge economic impact because of this disease. I just want to see a couple of slides. What's been happening? If you look at the jobs, within a month, like if you look from January to May, like within 2 to 3 months, more than 5 to 10% people have lost their jobs in all the developed countries. And if you look at this graph, this is in the US, like how many people filed for unemployment. So as you can see, within a month, tons of people filed for unemployment. I mean, so many people actually lost their jobs because of this pandemic. And 1/3 of US population is now actually unemployed because of coronavirus impact. And the reason being is that the most service industry was the most hit, and service industry is usually the backbone of the economy. Your restaurants and your theaters and buses, all of them got really badly hit. So that's why we expect that the economy will go down more. People will lose more jobs, as even if we try to open the economy. I'll show you some more graphs of this. So this one is showing the global market trend. Can you see this one? So as you see, this is based in the global stock market performance in 2020. And which slide are you showing? It's economic impact or which one? Okay, I'm sorry. See if you can see this one. Yes. Yeah. So this is the stock market data. So this is in the minus, see going up to -40. So if you look at UK, the stock, every stock had gone down by almost half, like -40%, and almost every country has similar kind of response. So people have lost a lot of money, companies have lost a lot of money already, not sure how things will recover, but right now things are only going bad. So what that means is, what can we do, right? We can't just sit there and see economy going bad. So what we have to do is that we have to come up with a treatment. So that's what we do in our lab, try to find a bench to bedside therapy for COVID-19. And one of the things we are doing is that we are trying to repurpose some of the already FDA approved drug. And I tell you what the reason for that. So usually whenever you look for any kind of treatment, having a new antiviral or vaccine can take years, because you have to do all these things. You have to first do preclinical, what we do in our lab on human cells or in animals, and then it has to go like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. After that you require the FDA approval, then they approve it, and then you go to phase 4. This thing can take years. So meaning that if you start from scratch, it will be years before you will have any vaccine or any drug, and will cost you millions of dollars, because you will have to have a huge number of human patients for these studies, and which is actually a very, very huge endeavors, and we are dealing with that right now. But if you already have an FDA approved drug which has already been approved for something else, then you cut short a lot of different things. Then you can straight go to the humans, because the safety and other things of the drugs has already been worked out. That's why a lot of people are trying to repurpose drugs, including our own lab. So right now there are no drugs that are approved by FDA. New drugs will take a lot of time. There has been some repurposing going on. There were some clinical trials with hydroxychloroquine. I will talk to you about that. It was one of the biggest failure. Then there were some polymerase inhibitors, which is favipiravir and remdesivir. Remdesivir seems to be most promising drug right now, but again, it's not a magic bullet. It's a polymerase inhibitor. Polymerase enzyme that's required for virus replication. So these drugs are usually not toxic, but they are not as effective. We'll talk about this more too. So what would be the ideal drug to treat COVID-19? It can't just be a polymerase inhibitor. It can't just be an antiviral. Like I mentioned, the disease is much more complex. Disease is much more complex just the virus. So just killing the virus will not work. So you will have to have a drug, or it could be multiple drugs that will be antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory, because like I said, there's a lot of inflammation going on and autoimmune disease. So you will have to take care of that along with the virus. So whatever drug you choose, either the drug will have all these properties, or you have a mixture of drugs that together will have all those properties. And ideally, in a pandemic situation, if drug can be taken orally, that will be really helpful. And the reason I'm saying you that because the remdesivir, it needs to be IV, and that makes a problem, especially in a resource limited country like Africa or India, where it will be very hard to administer those drugs intravenous every day. So having something orally will be really, really helpful. That's one of the limitations of remdesivir, that it has to be given intravenous. So we are doing a lot of study in our lab just to show what we do. We mostly do preclinical in our lab. So preclinical means that we tested either in a human cells or in animals. So what we do is that we can grow what we call lung in a dish. So we can take all the cells what usually found in a lung, and we can grow them in a dish, meaning that it will make a 3D kind of a nice model with the lung, and then you can infect this with the virus. What happened is this virus replicates so much that if you don't do any treatment, all of your cells will be dead within few hours, meaning that the virus is very, very deadly and it will kill every cell. So what we do is that if you treat it with some kind of drug which is actually blocking the virus or inhibiting the virus, then you will not have much virus and all of your lung cells will still be there. So that's a very good indication showing that if the drug is working. So we do different kind of treatment. Some we call prophylactic or therapeutic. Prophylactic, like you can treat the cells with the drug before giving the infection, or you can treat the cells with the drug after the infection. So that shows like if the drug can work as a prophylactic only, or it can be work as a therapeutic too. And once you see good data from these studies, then you move on to animal model. So the good thing about animals is that they can get infected and they die, which means that if you don't treat these animals, they will die because of the disease. But if your drug is good, then it will block the death of these animals. So when you infect these animals, then again, you can treat them with the drug before infecting or treat them with the drug after infecting, and then follow them and see if they are able to recover from the disease. And if they are, then this is your preclinical studies, and then you can move on to what we call as the clinical studies. So we have also done some of these studies in our lab, and one of the drug we tested many different drugs, and one of the drug, I'm not saying the name, I'm just saying drug one because they're still preclinical studies, right? So when we see the effect of this drug and why we think this drug has a great promise, because this drug affects both on the virus as well as on the inflammation. Like I mentioned, we have to have a drug that targets both of them, not only one thing. So when we see that if this virus can kill the cells, kill the virus, it can. Actually, when you compare to chloroquine, which is like hydroxychloroquine, it kills much better. And then most important thing is that this inflammation, these cytokines you see very, very high without treatment. Once you treat it with the drug, all the inflammation goes away. So that's a very, very significant data, and that's why we decided to move it forward and take it to the clinical trials to see if it can be effective. So this is what we are doing right now. It's a multi-stage, multi-arm clinical trials in which we are doing the different combinations. So we have our own drug, and then we are giving this drug in combination with other, like for example, I told you about remdesivir. which is another antiviral. So we are seeing if we give our drug along with remdesivir, maybe the effective will be even more, or if we give the drug alone, or if we give it with the ACE2 inhibitor. And ACE2 is also a receptor that virus uses for entry. So that's also one of the target for the virus treatment. So we are trying all these different combinations to see if we can find some effectiveness, or if we have to improve our drug, we will work on that too. So what other things are going on? We are not the only one working. There are several other labs, and there are so many different clinical trials going on. Can you see this slide? I don't know if you can see this slide. Let me do this again. Okay. Yeah, so there are several different treatments trials going on. Initially, they started with chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. I'm not sure if you heard the news, Trump asked from Modi, and Modi gave all the hydroxychloroquine, and we were about to save the world. But hydroxychloroquine was always a cheap fix. It's a drug that has tons of toxic effect. So of course, everybody was looking for a magic bullet, and they thought that nothing can be better than hydroxychloroquine because it's a dirt cheap drug and can be found everywhere, can be taken orally, and everybody thought, well, this will cure everything. But what we found out was that it did not cure anybody. It actually made the things worse. So FDA announced a warning saying, every physician, please do not prescribe hydroxychloroquine to anyone, because it can actually make your COVID-19 disease much worse than what it actually will be. So it was a big waste. A lot of I know our state here in Georgia and many other states in the United States bought like 100 million doses of hydroxychloroquine. They think that they will need. Now all of those will go down the drain. It will be a waste. Another drug that's, like I mentioned, is most effective currently is remdesivir. It's a polymerase inhibitor. It has a very good RNA antiviral activity, but this drug has limitation. Like I said, it's very, very expensive drug. It's a patent drug from Gilead Bioscience. It's a very expensive drug. Even if this drug will be very effective, I don't think in India we can afford it. And it has to be given IV, and one dose may cost like hundreds of dollars, one single dose. So it is not going to be a very effective treatment. There are couple of other antiviral like favipiravir. It was used for influenza before, so but it works same way like this. So it's an expensive drug and it's not that effective. There are other drugs people are trying, like immunomodulator. I mentioned you about the inflammation. So people are trying different immunomodulators which blocks the inflammation, and some of them are actually showing some good effect. But again, it will vary on patient to patient, which patient you are giving. Of course, there's a lot of talk, especially in India, about this plasma therapy. Everybody thinks that people will donate the plasma, give it to somebody else, and it will treat everybody. Again, it's a cheap fix. We always go for these kind of treatment when we don't find anything else. But plasma therapy has never worked in the past, and it just works once in a while here and there. Other than that, it can never be otherwise you could use this for every other virus, right? But we don't, because we know it doesn't work that well. But in some cases it could work. So people are trying, but I'm not that hopeful. Okay. There are many other clinical trials going on. I don't want to go all in detail, but people are trying basically anything. So if you look at like the different countries like Germany, people are giving, again, anti-inflammatory. There are other drugs people are trying. Even the blood pressure medicines people are trying. Different calcium medicines people are trying. So there are many clinical trials going on right now. So I'm sure when these clinical trials end, we will have a very good idea, or very good idea of what might like. They are another examples of many other treatment in different countries that's been going on in Iran or in China. There are many different kind of drugs that's been tested. Most of these are immunomodulatory drugs. They basically modulate the inflammation. And I don't know if you heard recent news that in children's there's a lot of these weird COVID-19 symptoms are coming up, which is related to inflammation. So I think many of these treatment might be useful in those kind of scenarios. But currently, we don't have any. We don't have any good medication. I know people are giving hydroxychloroquine, which probably should not be given. Other than that, remdesivir, it seems a little bit more effective, but we don't have that in India. And even in US, it's only available to very few people. There are only a couple of 100,000 doses with the company. So even if it works, it can only be given to those 100,000 people anyway. So everybody's working on it, including us, and hopefully soon we may have treatment, but it may take longer because the disease is very complicated. And even if you have a good drug, it may not work for everyone. So it may have to be a different treatment for every person. So we may need to come up with a combination of drug or multiple drugs to completely treat it, or we may never be able to treat it. So all these questions is up in the air. But currently, all we can do is the prevention, which is basically, the guidelines that government has. Avoid close contact, cover your cough, your sneeze, don't touch your eyes, wear a mask or a cloth face, stay home if you are sick, wash your hands. Whatever we can do to flatten that curve, and in the meantime we could have a treatment or a vaccine. That's all I have, actually. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to take any question that you have. And I'm sorry about all the technical problems. I'm a scientist. I'm not a computer engineer, so it's hard for me to go through all this technology. But we are all learning, through webinar. But thank you so much for listening. I know I took much more time than I should have, but I'm happy. I hope that you learned something, and I can answer.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, there are some questions.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to ask my questions, and I will ask the questions of viewers.
Yes.
Sir, I want to ask, are the chances of infection less in those who have previous exposure to BCG vaccine?
Very good question. My personal opinion, no. Other people may say yes. My personal opinion, no. There is no evidence. There's no evidence. It's just, there's no such. In India, we have taken so many different vaccines and we get exposed. So it might be protecting us, but there's no experiment evidence showing that.
Okay, sir. Fine. Thank you, sir. Sir, second question is, if somebody wants to design a new drug, then what would be the most appropriate or ideal target for the drug?
Well, it depends, right? If the drug can target the cell metabolism, and so what happened in that, you can target the virus itself. Virus has its own genes, a polymerase is there, protease is there. If you target protease, it's difficult because your cell has protease as well. So that becomes toxic to the cells. If you target polymerase, then it's safer because there's no polymerase of the cell. It will only target the viral polymerase. So it's less toxic to the cells. But at the same time, you would also need to have some mechanism to lower down the inflammation as well. But if you could effectively kill the virus, it will lower down some inflammation as well. But we have to make sure that the drugs are not really toxic. I hope that answers.
Sir, we have read that the virus binds to ACE2 receptors.
Yes.
So that can be a target for the drug.
It can, but recently, as we know that blocking ACE2 inhibitor hasn't worked. So what meaning is that although ACE inhibitor is important for virus to bind, but even in the absence of that, virus is still able to infect. So it hasn't worked. Many people have tried, even with the SARS-CoV-1 and MERS, trying to give ACE inhibitor, it did not work. Another strategy people are using right now is that instead of blocking ACE inhibitors, because it looks like there's another receptor virus can use, it's called TMPRSS2, right? So if you block ACE2, virus could still enter using the other receptor. Now, if you block both of them, we don't know if the virus could still enter. But another strategy people are using is that to give ACE2 as a soluble form. What that means is that it's not on the cells, you are inhaling it. So if ACE2 is in your blood or in your lung, then the virus could bind to it and just be metabolized outside instead of infecting the cell. So that's another thing people are trying to. It looks weird, like virus using ACE2 and why you are giving ACE2, but in soluble form it could work. But we don't know that because there could be more receptors virus could be using.
Hello. Hello. So my question is, hello.
Sir, next.
Yes, go ahead.
The next question is, as detergents can kill the virus outside the body, can edible detergents be used to kill the virus in blood?
Never do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. It will not kill it because, see, your virus isn't in your blood. It's not. It's in your lungs, deep in your lungs. There's no way you are getting
Yes, sir.
detergent down there. There's no way it's going all the way there. It will go someplace else and kill some other cells for no reason. Okay, so don't do that. It's
Okay.
not going to help at all. And some people say drinking alcohol and other things. It will not do that because your virus is replicating the cells inside your nose, deep inside your lungs. Okay, none of these places alcohol or any detergent will go. They won't go there. They won't reach all the way there.
Sir, there are some questions from viewers. What about the effect of COVID-19 on HIV patient? What precautions they should take to avoid the exposure from COVID-19?
That's a very good question. HIV patient, and that's one of the reasons because of the slow replication of the virus in HIV, and they're already little bit immunized. So if they get COVID-19, it could be much more severe. But luckily, we haven't seen that immunological data showing that patients get more sick or getting more sick. There's no data.
Sir, another question is, do we have any evidence that vegetarians are less prone to COVID-19?
Who? Sorry, I could not hear the model.
Do we have any evidence?
I could not hear anything. There's so much noise. You will have to mute. Now ask the question. I think hopefully you are mute. You have to unmute.
Sir, actually, my first question is that there are news that the patients who have got treated after recovery with the infection, they are developing the infection again. Does this mean that the antibodies formed in their body, they have not worked well, or there is some replication mutation in the virus? And there are also very news in the newspapers or some media.
I did not hear the last part, but let me try to answer. Can you hear me, right? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Please repeat your question.
Yes, sorry, that thing got cut. I heard your first part of the question. Can you, like, I know you asked that people are getting infected again, immunity is less. That's true. I will answer that. What was the last part of your question? Anyway, I'll try to answer that. So that's a very good question. So one thing is sure, we know about coronavirus is that the immunity is very short. So even if if a natural infection has a short immunity, your vaccine and other things will always be a problem. And like we see with the flu, like you have to take vaccine every year. So the immunity is low. So that is one reason that why people are infected again. Second reason could be a lot of people are now coming up with the data that the virus could still be hidden inside you. It could hide someplace. And even if you think that you are completely cured, and just because the virus is in your nose or nose swab doesn't mean that you don't have virus, right? And little bit later, it starts showing up again. Applications start happening again. That could be the second reason. Third reason could be that for every respiratory virus, usually the immunity is respiratory immunity, which is very different from the systemic immunity. We usually don't have a lot of antibodies against the respiratory virus infection. So there could be multiple reasons why people are getting infected again, and we are still trying to learn, but looks like the virus could just still hide for a long period of time. So it just never went away. It was always with you. You just can't identify or detect it. I hope that.
Sir, next question. Next question is, what is the period of quarantine for animals in which they are causing infection in lab?
Quarantine for animals. The infection is really fast. They die between 7 to 8 days. They are small animals, so they die much faster. So there's no quarantine period for them. Once they get infected,
Excuse me, sir.
they start seeing symptoms. Okay, sorry.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, how Japan approves remdesivir?
Sorry, say it again.
How Japan approves remdesivir?
Japan. Currently it's a conditional approval for remdesivir for a couple of countries, but I did not see Japan approved it. Or even if they have it, they were working on drug that's called favipiravir. That was the drug developed by Japanese company for influenza, and that's the drug they are working on.
And the other countries, sir,
Excuse me, sir.
in the media, we listen that Israel is doing the work and China and to Japan. Is it true?
So there are several different drugs. Like I mentioned in my slides, many trials are going on. Different countries are using different. And one of the problems that's happening with these clinical trials are that they are very poorly defined clinical trials. Sometimes the way you plan your clinical trial can be so bad that even if your drug is good, you can still see the results. Because, for example, if you give your drugs to patients who are already in the ICU or on the ventilator, many of them may still die even if your drug was good. And if you give your drug to early effective patient, then it may be very effective. So it really depends how you define your clinical trial. And many of these clinical trials have no N number, like very few patients. So it's very hard to know which drug is very effective compared to remdesivir, because they had some very big trials.
Sir, as per TV news, they said that they tested that COVID-19 found in animal. Whether it will transfer to mosquitoes, or mosquito can be a host?
No. Coronavirus in general is very big. So mosquitoes can carry number of viruses like flaviviruses. I work on like Zika, West Nile, but coronaviruses were never found in insects in the past, or in any kind of vector in the past. They're always found in so it's very likelihood is very low that it will go to mosquito. Another reason is that the genome of the virus is very big. Big viruses, they can only have viruses. So chances are low, but it has been detected in animals. But will that animal be able to transmit to somebody else is a very different question, because you may have a virus, but you need a very high amount of replication to be able to transmit to someone else, right? For a blood-borne pathogens like West Nile or Zika, biting a mosquito can take it. But if it's a respiratory pathogen, if the virus is not in your blood, it's in your nose or your lungs, how will mosquito bite it and get it, right? So that's also another issue.
Sir, one more, sir. That is the main thing, sir. Now COVID-19 pandemic is lockdown is going on. So what we have to do after this removal of lockdown? That is the very important, sir, for general people or educated people. Everybody need to know that what would be the condition and how we have to maintain.
Like I mentioned, the virus may be with us for a long time. It could take 2 to 3 years to completely wipe it out. Best thing would be to just keep following at least try to follow some precautions. So even if some people get sick, it just doesn't burden the health system that much. And like I said, this virus doesn't kill that many people, 3 to 4% mortality. So most of the people should recover by themselves. So, in general, if we have a very good hospital system, we should be able to manage 95% of the patients anyway. So if it's just like in country like India, if the cases are so many in one day, then things will become really bad. And like I mentioned, there's vaccines and clinical trials going on. There are already some effective drugs. There will be more effective drugs coming up. We just have to give ourselves some time and just work together so that don't spread it too much. I guess that's all we can do right now.
What suggestion you are giving to the small kids, sir? What suggestion you are giving to small kids? Now colleges and schools are going to be open. Then how the parents will take care of their kids This is a big challenges now it's coming, sir, because we have to follow the guidelines given by WHO and Government of India and local health bodies. But what would we have to do while opening everything, especially
Yeah, so
kids?
that's a big question. You know, opening other things is different idea. Opening school becomes a completely different system, especially with the small children. You can't teach them like social distancing, and you can't teach them to do this and that. It's very difficult. It's very, very challenging. And like I said, many of these young children may not get a severe disease, or nowadays may, but we may have older people in house, like grandparents, who can get infected from the kids and may even die. So it's a huge risk. It's a huge challenge. We all have to, I guess, work
Any
together.
suggestion from your side, sir? Any suggestion, any tips? At least we will spread. No one giving such kind of spread. Okay, maintain distance. But a small kid, they will go to school. They will touch everywhere. They will interact to everybody, and they will come. And mama will hug. Father, parents will hug. And what we should tell them? What are the conditions, sir? Please, this is a very important. I am suffering from a lot by everybody.
No, I know. We are all suffering. I have my 4-year-old daughter too, and she also wants to go to school, and I don't know how to tell her to maintain social distancing. And I also want to hug her too, right? And even I go to lab, and sometimes I'm scared too if I'm infecting and I'm infecting somebody else too. So because it can be asymptomatic, right? I may not know. So I know this is a
Right,
big
sir.
all of us.
Sir, I have an important question, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes. Sorry.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, actually, my question is that how much percentile it is possible to make a vaccine for an organism which is changing its shape and character every minute, every second, and this virus lie in that organism. Not this, all viruses lie in that organisms that which changes its character and shape every seconds or every minute if they enter the host body. So, how much percentile it is possible to make vaccine?
Yeah, one thing I want to clear, compared to other viruses, this doesn't change that much. So that's a good thing. There are other viruses like influenza, they actually change way more. This virus is actually way more stable. So it's not changing as much. Little bit change, little bit mutation does not make your vaccine go bad. It has to change a lot. So I haven't seen that kind of mutations in coronaviruses in the past, and we haven't seen with this virus as well. It's not mutating as fast. So vaccine is possible. The only issue is that how effective will it be, and how long you have to again take it. Like, will you have to take it every year or every few years? How long the immunity will last? That's one of the questions. Like, in general, the immunity with coronavirus is not very long lived. So that's a concern than the mutation. Mutations are actually not a big concern in this case, so far at least. It may change,
Okay.
change.
And sir, I still not got one thing, sir, that how we are treating that coronavirus with hydrochloroquine, as it is anti-parasitic tablets, hydrochloroquine. We use it for malaria, and malaria is a parasite, and we are treating a patient a patient who is infected by coronavirus. So how a anti-parasite tablet is?
No, first of all, it's not working. Okay, so hydroxychloroquine does not work on COVID-19. And hydroxychloroquine, it does not even a clear anti-parasitic either. Hydroxychloroquine is an immunomodulator drug. Hydroxychloroquine is given for lupus, or lupus is an autoimmune disease, or like disease like arthritis. Hydroxychloroquine was never meant to against any organism. It was started giving against malaria because it can reduce fever very good. It never worked against malaria. The reason WHO decided to give us to everybody, including in India, because it's a dirt cheap drug. There are many better drugs against malaria than hydroxychloroquine. WHO and UN decided to give it because it was very cheap, and it can be given to mass population for almost free. So they decided to give all India, Africa. They just give us so much hydroxychloroquine. Okay, keep giving to everybody. And hydroxychloroquine is an immunomodulator. It works very good in reducing the fever. Okay, so in malaria, what we see is that we see recurrent fever, right, again and again. So when physicians give this, the fever goes down. So we think that it works against the parasite. It has never worked against the parasite. And the same thing happened with the COVID-19. Initial COVID-19 cases were with high fever, and everybody thought if you break down those fever, they will recover. So hydroxychloroquine, like I said, it's very potent drug. It can reduce the fever. So that's what it did in some patients. It reduced the fever, and some of the people recovered. So we thought that, okay, this drug worked, but this drug never worked on parasite, never worked on the virus. It's not antiviral, it's not anti-parasitic. It's a immunomodulated drug that just block the inflammation, and that's what is proper used. In America, it's not given for anti-parasitic, it's only given for lupus and or arthritis. Both of them are autoimmune diseases. Make
Yes.
sense?
Sir, next question is, the COVID-19 pregnant women are delivering healthy babies. What is your perspective in this?
Well, that's actually a very good news. They are delivering healthy babies, and it's not much surprising because it's not necessarily, it's very hard for any virus to cross placenta barrier. Our body has a very good way to protect the baby, and the placental barrier is very, very thick barrier. It's very hard for any virus to go through that barrier. If somebody can, it's very, very few viruses out of all the viruses can actually cross the placenta. So it's not surprising that a coronavirus also cannot cross the placental barrier. The only issue was that during the delivery, if a nurse has a COVID-19 or mother has COVID-19, then the exposure to mother or the nurse could make them infected, right? So that was actual concern. The concern was never that the virus will cross the placenta and goes to the baby while in the uterus. It was all concern was always that during the delivery, what will happen if some instrument is infected or things like that are infected, which I think a lot of hospitals are taking very well care of, maintaining all the disinfectant, sanitization, so we don't see that. So that's a good thing.
Sir, next question is there any evidence that vegetarians are less prone to COVID-19?
No, there's no evidence.
And sir, one more thing is that breastfeeding mothers, suppose she is having COVID-19, then through feeding, can it be transmitted to the baby?
Very less likelihood. The reason being is that it's very hard for, this is a RNA envelope virus. What that means is that it's a very fragile virus. So these kind of viruses usually don't survive in acidic environment like your stomach or milk. Most of these are with the low pH. So very hard for these viruses to survive and to spread. Sometimes scientists like us do research and they found, we found little bit of RNA in the breast milk. That's RNA means that the virus is dead, and virus, it may not be a live virus. So you need to have a very high amount of high active virus, and especially with the baby too. Once they drink the milk straight go to stomach. Again, your stomach is really acidic. It's very hard for any virus to survive. It has to go through nose. So chances of this virus to be very, very effectively transmitting through breast milk, chances are very, very low.
Mamu, I want to ask a question from you.
Yes.
Will the antibodies test for COVID-19 work?
That's a very good question. Well, antibody tests may not work actually. We all are having very high hope. First of all, antibody test does not tell you are recently infected. It actually tells you were infected before, right? So it doesn't really help much in the treatment anyway, because it takes like a couple of weeks before your antibodies are at high level to be able to detect. By that time, patient may have recovered. So it may not actually work at all. But it may be good to use those tests for like overall surveillance, like how much population is infected, how many people were infected, like basic epidemiological studies. But other than that, I don't know where they should be helpful. That's a very good question.
So there is one more question. Is there any Ayurvedic extract to protect or prevent from COVID-19?
There could be. We know there are a large number of Ayurvedic extract which have anti-inflammatory properties, and some of them also have antiviral properties. So it's not surprising that some of these won't work. And we could have tried. Many people gave me an idea of even try turmeric powder. And it may actually work, but I don't want to publish that because people will start eating too much turmeric powder right now. So a lot of these Ayurvedic things may work, but like I said, main issue will be, and that's what a lot of people are working in, that's called targeted delivery. Somehow the drug has to reach deep down the lungs, right? So whatever drug we have to give, we somehow have to inhale. So a lot of people are working on making that drug to be able to inhale, so we can get a more dose in the deeper in the lungs. Otherwise, when we eat it or when we IV it, we may not get that much dose deep in the lungs. But a lot of Ayurvedic drugs will work actually.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one more question. What is your opinion about that COVID-19 is transgenic or natural?
It's natural, right? It's a natural expansion of any RNA virus. It's a natural expansion.
Sir,
Thank you so much, sir.
excuse me, sir. Hello.
Yes.
So you said that this virus is very fragile one. And what is the effect of temperature? As previously we were hearing that this will be not able to survive at high temperatures, but still we are seeing the cases in the high temperature zones.
That is true. That's what again, this virus is a fragile virus. It's not able to survive. But what's happening is that, and that's what everybody thought, as the summer will come, number of cases will go down. But that usually only happens when you have a low number of cases. When you have these many high number of cases, even temperature, because even if temperature will cut down some cases, there will be some hotspot remaining, within the household and places like this. It will decrease. Believe me, it will decrease in next as summer rises, but it may come back again. It may not go to zero, but it will go down and then probably come back again. Summer hasn't come yet. We will wait. Good summer will be June and July, right?
So what is the temperature range at which this virus cannot survive? 35 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Celsius, 45? Can you
Yeah,
please?
around at 40, it should not be able to survive at all. 40, 45 is a very high temperature for virus to survive. And remember, I told you, right, it's this virus isn't basically getting infected because somebody sneeze on surface and later on somebody touch it. It's mostly spreading in household from person to person directly. It's not like it went onto a surface. It's like I'm sick and I'm spreading it to my daughter. It doesn't have to go through a surface. It can go directly, right? So that's where it's mostly spreading. So that may not have effect on temperature because our body temperature is still 37, right?
So it means you are saying that at 40 to 45 degrees Celsius, it won't be able to survive.
It will not survive. So number of cases will decrease at that time.
Sir, sir, one question, sir. Hello.
Yes.
Sir, can we develop a blocker which could be spread in our environment? Like if I am sneezing, then this virus comes out from me. If I am infected person, this virus came out from me, and it has been blocked by the chemical we have spread in the environment, so it can't be transmitted to other person.
I did not hear very well because there was some echo going on. But
Okay, sir. I will repeat it again. Hello.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Sir, can we develop a chemical blocker, such chemical blocker which we can spread in our environment, our nearby environment? So
No.
if I am infected person, I am sneezing, it is coming out from me and it is blocked by chemical blocker and it is not transmitted to another person.
No.
Like
No, there's
using
no such
sanitizer.
thing. No. That's absolutely not possible.
So,
Absolutely
sir,
not.
how it is possible to block it inside the body, sir, if it is not possible to block it outside of the body?
Yeah, you have to block it inside the body. You have to treat it with the drugs. You have to treat the patient with the drugs. You can't block it outside the body. Like environment, like I say, it's not like in the air. Like me and my daughter, we are so close. And if I'm spreading to her, it's such a close environment, right? So it's very hard to do that. It's not that it's in air everywhere. It's not in air. It's not here. It's not here. It's like right close.
Okay, sir, I got it, sir. Sir, one last question from my side. Sir, this is the last question, sir. Sir, what are your views on evolution of human beings, sir? Because we are a most evolved species, but we are actually it could be drawbacks in aspect of living or in aspect of age. We can't live in so drastic conditions as that viruses and bacteria can live. So, is this evolution is an advantage or drawback, sir? What do you think, sir, on this?
Definitely, evolution is an advantage. If you look at bacteria and viruses, they have no ability to multiply on their own, right? So they are always dependent on a higher evolution species like us or animals to be able to reproduce, right? So we have a capability to reproduce ourselves and not dependent on anybody else. Even virus, can't reproduce by itself. It has to go inside our cell and use our machinery to do that, right? So it's a evolution of virus, it's a survival of the fittest. So viruses and bacteria, they are also evolving and they have lived with us for centuries. Virus and bacteria, tons of them live inside us every day, right? So they have lived with us for generations, and we have lived
Oh,
overcome that through our immune response. But sometimes, like we see in coronavirus case, that same immune response can become dangerous, right? So it's a balance and checkpoint, right? How do we make sure that we have a good immune response to kill everything, but at the same time it's like optimum not to damage ourselves, right? So that's where some of the problem are. Other than that, I think evolution wise we are way advanced, and that's why we are able to do all those things.
okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, Dr. Mukesh.
Yes.
Dr. Mukesh, Dapsol is given with the combination of the trimethoprim for the treatment of the pneumonia. And action is also same. Can it be effective for the corona?
Could be, there are, like I said, several different drugs are being tried, and the reason being is that every patient is showing a different kind of symptoms because of those underlying conditions. So in some cases things work, other cases it does not work. So it's a little bit more complicated disease than just the pneumonia. But of course, a lot of people are actually dying from pneumonia. So it could have a beneficial effect, but we don't know that yet.
Oh, thank you so much,
Sir,
sir.
actually, you are also saying that this virus is a very fragile one and it will die over 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. And there is some myths among the people that they are saying that taking hot water bath will help prevent this virus. Does
See, what happened is that, like I said, virus is inside the cell. It's not hanging out in the nose or here. It's gone inside the cell. Whatever hot water you take, it's not going inside. Okay, it will never go inside. So don't kill yourself with too much hot water or detergent or things like that. I know a lot of people washing with the disinfectant, this and that. I feel that a lot more people will die from this kind of toxicity than the COVID-19 itself. So just normal water. If you think if you are trying to wash off the virus, just a basic water will do it. If the virus is here in my hand, if I just wash it, that's good enough. It doesn't even have to be detergent. It doesn't even have to be a hot water. But if it's inside the cell, it doesn't matter what I do. The drug has to go inside the cell and kill it, right? And the water
so
and
when we are taking the swab test, sir, so in case we are taking the swab from the nose or throat, then there are chances that the virus may be within the cell and we cannot detect the swab in the nose and throat.
that's always that's the problem. That's always a problem with the swab test. They were never accurate. What happened is that the virus is inside the cell. Sometimes it's coming out, right? If it's a lot of replication happening, then it's good. Then you take a swab test, then it will work. But it's not every day. You will take a swab test today, it could be negative. You take it 2 days later, it will come back positive. So ideally, you should be doing every day if you really want to make sure. Otherwise, these swab tests don't work that well. Because first of all, it has to go way up higher in the nose. A lot of people don't even take that swab very well, right? It's a very tiny amount of virus outside because most of the virus is inside. Of course, PCR, the test we do is very sensitive, so it can amplify even a couple of viral RNA copies and we can detect it. But if you don't detect it, that doesn't mean that you don't have virus. Not at all. You can still have it, of course.
So in case, sir, if any person got in contact with a person having the infection and he sneezes out, and this healthy person comes in contact with the droplets in the air. So suppose the droplets will enter into the mouth or nose of the healthy person, and just after that, a healthcare professional just takes a swab. Will it be given any positive result
No.
or not?
Not immediately. It will take at least 3 to 4 or 5 days for virus to put a hold on your body and to be able to replicate that much that virus can come out and attack it. If you just got infected, you can test any swab you want, you are not getting any virus because the number of droplets that goes in are very low. It's only that virus when we go in the cell will replicate to so high level, then some virus will come out which you can detect. Otherwise, you can't detect it.
And sir, one more thing is that there is some ambiguity between the time the virus remains live. Actually, the virus is not live at all. But what is the lifespan of the virus on any metallic surface or wooden surface or on the skin or some other surfaces? Can you please outline anything?
Well, there has been study done by NIH. They said it can survive up to 24 hours. In some surfaces it could be up to 2 days, right? So that is a dangerous thing. But again, those studies were done in the lab. Okay, lab studies are different. So if I throw a tons of virus on a cardboard box and 2 days later I found some virus, I can say that the virus survived. But it is the same thing happening outside. Is somebody throwing that much virus? And then maybe just touching maybe a little bit virus. If you have a little bit virus, will that survive for 2 days? Maybe not. Or even if that survives, but most of that will die, right? So if most of that will die, a little bit of virus will survive. Is that good enough to infect a big human being? Probably not. You need a high dose. That high dose usually comes from a close contact, meaning that you are getting exposed again, and again, and you are getting exposed from multiple directions because the person lives right next to you and in your own room, and using your towel, using the clothes, things and that's a big exposure, right? A tiny exposure of a someplace may not be enough. It may actually be good because you get a sub-level exposure and make some antibodies, right? But in general, in the lab settings, it could stay alive for 24 to 48 hours.
Sir, on which kind of surface, sir?
So they tested every kind of surface. They tested on plastics and they also tested on like steel. Most of these surfaces 24 hours, but if you talk about cardboard boxes are usually hard to disinfect. In those cardboard boxes, it could be up to 3 to 4 days. That's what they find out. But cardboard
And
boxes
even sir,
what?
Even sir, it was said that it will survive only for 10 minutes on the skin of a healthy person. Does it true?
On a skin of a healthy person, it may not survive too much. Skin is a different story than on a cardboard box. Like I said, surviving is a different story. Like how much virus was there to start with. If there's a lot of virus was there to start with, then even if 95% of that will die, there might be 2-3% virus remaining thereafter. But if the virus to start was low, then it may not survive at all, right? So it depends on how much virus that goes initially. But usually this virus doesn't survive that long. It doesn't. Let me tell you something. We do experiment in our lab. We keep the virus frozen at -80 and we take it out and we want to do infection right away because we are worried that if the virus stays at the room temperature for a little bit more, then it will actually die and our experiment will fail. That's how we worry about. So it's not a very strong virus. It's easily killable and fragile virus. Okay.
Sir, actually, do you want, hello?
Yes.
Sir, actually, for how long time it will survive on the skin? I'm asking this one. Is there any study which you can outline here?
Surviving on the skin, I haven't seen a study where somebody put it on the skin as how long it survived, but I can't imagine surviving for too long on the skin. No, probably not.
Yes, Dr. Mukesh.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Mukesh. Dr. Rita here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for a nice session. And it was really wonderful, informative lecture. And what for your time? Are you listening?
Yes, I am listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was pleasure. So happy to share my information.
Sir, thank you so much that you spared your valuable time and you addressed all the questions and you explained each and every point very clearly. And now I would like to request our principal, Dr. Anupama Setia, to give the formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, Dr. Mukesh. This is Dr. Anupma. First of
Hello.
all, thank you so much. First, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I hope the delegates, actually the time was going out and the delegates' questions were not stopping. And I was so worried that I have taken just 1 hour permission for you, your valuable time. And still it's 1.5 hours. Thank you for being patient, so much patient and answering the questions of the delegates. Thank you so much, sir. And we congratulate you for the success in invention of the new medicine and hope you are going for the clinical trials and get the best medicine for the COVID.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I'm audible?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I'm really thankful to my faculty members, Dr. Rita, Dr. Shikha, and all the participant delegates for working day and night for this, to making this international webinar a success, a big success. Thank you so much, Dr. Mukesh. It was wonderful and it was very informative. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I would also thank each and every member who participated in this webinar. Thank you so much.